Hi there, my name is Bruce Walker and I am one of the co-founders and CEO of FutureX.
Hello, and I'm Zoi Kantounatou, and I'm the other co-founder and the CFO of FutureX. So as a team, we used to work together in an office, and we're a small team. And even though it wasn't perfect, and we realized that later, it was quite easy because you can realize when things were going wrong. You can see people next to you having a conversation, and I could step in and be like, oh, wait, you're not talking about the right thing, or we haven't made a decision on that. How are you progressing? And I think once we moved remotely, we realized that actually our communication processes and the way we work together as a team were not as nailed down as they could have been. So some of the things we have trouble with was feeling overwhelmed with who is making decision, where all the tasks sit, how can we see all the different projects. As a business that runs a lot of different projects, it was very difficult for everyone, especially the team, to understand how this contribute to the objectives of the business, how my project, the project that I'm working on my own, is complementary to the big objective that the business is trying to achieve, or the financial targets for the quarter. So we have been having these challenges for a while, and we weren't exactly sure how we're able to overcome them, because it was constantly conversations. And then, especially, as I said, when we moved online, everyone started working on silos, everyone working remotely, and that became even more difficult to realize and understand what people knew or thought of, or what assumptions they were making.
Yeah, and I would definitely just completely echo that in the sense that objectives for a business like ours can also, they need to evolve as the conditions evolve. And I think that was becoming quite hard for us to be able to effectively communicate how a project and how it links to that objective as we evolve in this, particularly, during the pandemic. I think that's been, and where those different projects then start to intersect with each other, because it's easy to then start thinking, one project, then the next project, then the next project, but in reality, it doesn't work that way. They intersect. And so that's definitely some of the challenges that we were having, and really keen to think, how do we possibly get oversight on all of this?
Sharktower has definitely helped us in business. I think the main thing is make it a lot easier to have everything in one place. I think, kind of like I always said before, objectives change, but they're there. People can link the projects with the objectives. And I think we're suddenly seeing a lot more questions about people coming to us and say, oh, you know what, how is my project linked to the business objectives? I can see that, or I need to put an outcome there. What are the targets that I need to achieve in this period of time? And it's amazing to see that coming from them rather than us having to have this conversation constantly. I think being able to have an oversight on everyone's workload and the ability to see how things work in an interesting way for our team, I think, is that because you have the planning view and the Kanban view in Sharktower, it works for both people who are very visual and they want to see the timeline, but also people who like lists, and they can start kind of like moving things around. So I think it supports everyone in the team to be able to put the tasks there, but it has also made decisions a lot easier, because we can easily see when people are blocked. When a decision needs to be made, you get notified and said, I can't move on with my work because I'm waiting for that decision. And as we said before, it's interesting because it helps us map out what are the different projects and when they're happening, because you can see that all on the timeline. And actually you see that the new project is starting before the previous one ends. And that is something that in theory we have struggled before, because people get that, but they're so focused on their workload that they don't realize the impact that might have on the timeline. But now you can see that clearly.
Definitely. I think as well, for me personally, being able to see like at what stage something else is holding something else up, and realize that actually it can be a really small thing that you might not appreciate, it is actually holding up 3 or 4 other people from being able to progress. And actually quite often I find is like the leader of a business, your job's to move obstacles and problems out the way. And so the last thing I ever want is for me to be the block. And it's now something that has definitely made it much more visual for me to say, oh, I could remove that problem and that project can progress. Whereas before, that would sometimes go on until the next meeting, till we next got together to have a conversation, and we realized, who was blocking who, whereas Sharktower makes it much, much more visual and kind of almost notifies you, I suppose, that there's something you could be doing. This project's starting to slip.
Definitely. And adding to that, just reminding me, is that we started doing our stand-ups through Sharktower. And that's been a massive difference, because basically you can just type the things, what's happening, type tasks while you're doing the meeting, and then automatically is in Sharktower. And I think it eliminates all the steps that we had to do before. We're taking a meeting, who is taking the notes? Is the person who's taking the notes actually making sure that everyone is putting the things on the to-do list? Does everyone know the timelines? Do we actually have understanding? You know, people in meetings don't always listen. And then they leave the meeting and they have no idea what happened or whether that was their task. So actually suddenly being able to finish the meeting and being, you know, everyone has their own tasks. We know what happened. We know what the decisions were made. That has made a massive difference.
Wow, we can see now which tasks are taking a really long time for people. And it's not necessarily that they're super complex tasks. It's just that they're quite laborious tasks sometimes. And so that has helped us in terms of, is everyone doing the best, you know, in their role, or actually could we be bringing people in to help alleviate some of the pressures and make the projects go much faster? You know, some of the areas I think that slip tend to be things that are just, not that they're complex, it's that they're workload, and that, you know, that it's going to take time. So that for me personally is something that I've definitely, it's helped me get a better perspective, I suppose, of what the business needs.
And adding to that is we also have a better understanding now of the tasks that the functions are working together. And I think we knew that functions were working closely together on different things, but having that visibility on which exactly tasks are there, and then realizing, okay, now there is an issue with this particular task, or where can we support, or communication. I think kind of like it makes the management of a team a lot easier, because you can actually interject in the places that there is more need, rather than just kind of like a general management approach when you make assumptions of where the issues are. I think that's definitely one. I think in terms of meetings, there's definitely seemed to be easier to make decisions, as we said, so there's not demand for a lot of meetings. I think, as kind of like, as you mentioned that before, but we would have to wait until the next meeting to make a decision, or for someone to say, I need this task right now, because we've been using communication methods like Slack, and it feels a bit more invasive. It feels a little more pressure when you get a message and be like, have you done this? But I think Sharktower, it kind of like sits there. So it's a lot easier for us to be like, oh, this is a task that I need to prioritize, but it's not something I need to do right now. So it kind of like cut the time between urgent right now, you need to do this, even if it's not. And we're having a meeting in 2 weeks, so we're going to talk about it then, into something in the middle, which is a lot more healthier.
Yeah, I'd also say as well that, you know, leaders can end up being a bottleneck sometimes, because, you know, all decisions have to come up through this way. And even though that's not necessarily what you're trying to create, that culture, is that people want approval. And I think what Sharktower has enabled us to do is people seeing like, actually, no, you can make that decision. You don't have to wait to get someone else to approve it. You can see where in the timeline that fits and why it's important that you can just make that decision now and move on, rather than, and I think that's going to be really, really powerful for us, particularly as we onboard more and more people and grow and scale, is that they can see that project formula. And so it should expedite the onboarding process for folks trying to learn. You know, we've got lots of big projects on, lots of moving pieces. It can be quite overwhelming to come in and be like, whoa, what is going on here? Whereas this shows you how each project works, where they link to each other, and who's to make decisions where, which, you know, makes the whole process much more efficient. Some of the kind of more basic project management or management tools is that I feel like there's a lot of input required from you, and then it gets out of date and you need to update it. And it's not very, they often don't live with you. The project doesn't evolve and live. Whereas I feel like Sharktower kind of is set up for that. Whereas, you know, I remember us using other products before, and then you put it all up and it's this big board of stuff, but then it gets out of date and you need to then go in and change it again. It's not very adaptive, I suppose. And so times you end up filling them up and then leaving them because they get out of date really quickly. Whereas I think one of the good things about Sharktower is that it all links to each other. So it evolves as the project evolves, and things don't really get out of date as quickly.
in particular for me, to that point, Bruce, because it has the function of templates in particular projects, I think that has been something very interesting for us, because it even helps us put down the process of how we do things, because we do events. So it's kind of like, the next big event has a very similar timeline and process with the previous one. So it's a lot easier to duplicate. It's a lot easier to start again and say, okay, this is the template I'm starting, rather than feeling this overwhelming feeling of, oh, I have to start again, and well, what did I do, and go back and everything. So that's definitely, but also for me, I know I mentioned that before, but is this ability to cater for people with different needs within the team. So that aspect of, is not only Kanban, is not only a list, is not only a board, it has the visual aspect. You can see that, you can see only your tasks, you can see the project tasks, kind of like it helps you choose what is best for you, rather than having for you to create the ways to do that, making the platform more complex.